Thank you for joining us for a conversation about the Youth Employment Strategy. We're Bermuda Youth Connect, which is an organization that was founded to promote civic engagement among the youth, and we do that by bridging the gap with our leaders. So here we're here with Minister Hayward, who is the Minister of Labor, and we're going to get into the employment strategy, but we're really grateful for you being here. Thank you for traveling in this heat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And before we begin, Minister Hayward is just going to give a brief background of what the employment strategy is, the process that went into it, and everything. So, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for your attendance here today. The Youth Employment Strategy was a strategy developed after the ministry determined that there needed to be a concerted effort and focus on getting our young persons back into the world of work. We had seen that the youth unemployment rate actually increased to roughly around 30%. By any measure, that is unacceptable. And so it had always been high, and we had always had challenges in terms of employment for our young persons. And so the Youth Employment Strategy is a concerted effort to ensure that we close whatever gaps that exist in terms of connecting our young persons with jobs, reduce barriers as much as we possibly can, but have a system in place that will ensure that we have a sustainable way forward as it pertains to our young persons obtaining employment.
Good afternoon, Minister Hayward. My name is Xavier Ramsey. I recently graduated from Work Academy, and I wanted to ask you about the first goal, which speaks about creating the opportunity to refine the soft skills required to be successful in the workplace. I wanted to ask, how will training and other programs incorporate the development of hard skills, such as learning how to use operation systems, which make them good candidates for specific companies that they are interning at?
When we looked at the competency gaps from both what young persons were articulating and also employers were articulating, it's that most times young persons have the ability to do a particular job, and then they get the opportunity to be placed in the workplace. But then they find it as a difficult transition of moving from an unstructured environment to a structured environment, which is the workplace, and understand the cultural norms that take place within the workplace. Employers have also indicated that to be a challenge. And the Department of Workforce Development does a good job in terms of making referrals for young persons to take advantage of opportunities that exist. But then when we looked at the statistics in terms of the retention rate of those young persons, not all the time were the retention rates favorable. And when we had specific conversations with employers as it pertained to why they had to make some of the decisions that they made to not retain some of our youth, a lot of it had to do with the employability skills not being there. From our lens, this should be a process where we ensure that the skill sets that we provide our young persons with are the skill sets that are expected by employers, but also that when there is a recognition that the workplace skill sets need improvement, there are programs in place that can assist that person with brushing up on their workplace skills and understanding office culture, understanding personal brand, understanding how to communicate with the workplace, instead of dismissing a young person from the workplace because their skills are not up to the expectation of employers.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ajay Peets. I am one of the co-founders of Bermuda Youth Connect. And in lieu of the first goal, I actually have a question myself that transitions really well into what we're talking about. My question is, how will you ensure equal opportunity for stakeholders for fields that are underrepresented? The insurance pipeline is already plentiful in terms of opportunity. So for examples like with healthcare, education, and other careers, how can we offer more support and opportunity for those students in those fields?
When we first began this journey, and this is pre the Youth Employment Strategy, it was when we were developing our workforce development strategy. We recognized that two things need to take place. Number one, there needs to be adequate employer engagement between the government and employers so that there is a pipeline that's created in terms of persons obtaining jobs in high demand occupations so that we can better understand the current jobs that are in demand and the jobs that will be in demand in the future. And we felt as though employers would be best positioned to advise us as to where the opportunities will lie. The second thing is closing the gap in terms of connecting our young persons to those opportunities and ensuring that young persons are cognizant of the opportunities that exist. We saw that it was a gap in terms of career advisement as well. And so let's say somebody did have a competency in math. Well, what careers are best suited for that particular competency? What education requirement is required? What is the experience requirement? And then ensuring that we have some type of, the information is passed on to the young persons, and not just the young persons, their parents as well, so that persons are making knowledgeable decisions in terms of their future career paths. But it takes all of us working within the system, that is the Department of Workforce Development, the education system, employers, all rowing in the same direction. And that's what we set out when we put the workforce development strategy in place, understanding that pipelines need to begin well within the school system so that persons are prepared upon graduation and not just after graduation trying to determine how best their competencies fit into the job market.
Good afternoon. My name is Malai Smith. I'm a current nursing student studying in the UK. So just piggybacking off of your question. So I went private school. I went to VHS for middle and high school. And you mentioned that Barclay done those types of things to help you with employability. Now, I will say, coming from a private school, we didn't necessarily, we weren't really pushed into the workforce as much as we were definitely pushed into academics to be able to get to tertiary education so that we can go into the workforce. I feel like for me, we weren't given those skills to be able to know how to complete a resume or to be able to do interviews and things of that nature properly so that we can successfully get into the workforce. So I feel like that's a little bit of an issue. And I know it is kind of hard to bridge the gap between the public and the private sector, because I know for me, even coming back to the island from school, even looking for employment within the health sector, you know, the BHB does a good job, the workforce development does a good job at placing students within healthcare fields, but at a point in time, they do run out. And having to either speak to or get in contact with private healthcare sectors, they're not as lenient as, you know, the public healthcare sector would be to take on students. So unfortunately, you know, us in healthcare or students that are in healthcare, sometimes you don't really get that full experience to be able to know what type of field of work you want to go into, whether it is private or public, because I will say there is a difference between working within a hospital setting and working within a doctor's office or a clinic. So hopefully from, you know, your goal 3, supporting and promoting science and technology and things like that, that some sort of gap can be bridged between the public and the private sector when it does come for students, when it comes to employment.
Yeah, and so that our audience is clear when we start talking about employability skills. These skills will be a feature of every program that the Department of Workforce Development actually offers. And the skills consist of developing your brand, emotional intelligence and communication, diversity and inclusion, office etiquette, resolving conflicts in the workplace, building a resume and cover letters, employability certifications, personal development where it's required, allowing one to set smart objectives for themselves, and then the creation of their own career paths. So you may enter into an occupational category because that's a step in the right direction for your ultimate career ambition. You spoke about the gap that exists in terms of if you don't get the opportunity from a public sector institution such as the hospital, it's difficult to get opportunities within the private sector, and then the way in which you're treated once you get those opportunities being different. Here's where I talked about employer engagement being important. The Department of Workforce Development and the ministry will work to close those gaps where they exist. And we're trying to do that with things like our graduate training program. So if we identify that you want to move into that particular space, then we can have this that dialogue with employers directly. And what we done in the past when we rolled out our reemployment strategy is we called industry groups together and we discussed how can we create a bridge for persons to take advantage of jobs that exist. And we anticipate doing the exact same thing for our young persons. Having that conversation with industry to say, we have a number of interns, what is required to get them in the door? And then once in the door, how can we support them on their particular journey? And so that is a key feature. Networking is an important factor as it pertains to employment in Bermuda. That's just a fact. Sometimes individuals, based off of the socio-economic upbringing, are locked out of some networking opportunities. And as a result, this is where the plan speaks to us creating that bridge. So it's less reliant on individual networking, but more reliant on a system that we have in place that creates a pathway for individuals who are looking to take advantage of opportunities.
My name is Rakaya Simmons. I'm currently finishing my LPC at the University of Law Online. Basically, that just means that I'm doing law. Firstly, thank you so much for having us. I feel like it's very important that we have these conversations, and I, for one, I think I can speak for most of us, we don't take this lightly. Long overdue, but thank you so much. I think my question is pretty simple. Like, in regard to Goal 5, improve public access to relevant labor market information and career opportunities. What is that going to look like? Like, how are you planning to do that with workforce and development? Is that like a new site that you guys are trying to figure out? Like, are you consulting youth in regard to that? Like, how is that looking? And like, as far as social media, are you like planning to have a new platform on social media? How is that gonna like come to light?
Thank you for that question. And what we want to ensure at the end of the day with that particular goal is that everybody is clearly informed of the jobs that are in demand and the experience and the education levels that are required for those jobs, where you can get help locally to progress along that particular pathway. In order for this goal to be effective, we need to use every medium possible to ensure that the information is readily available so that persons are making informed decisions. And so it does look like a revamped website. It does look like enhanced use of social media. It does look like us going into the school systems. It does mean more of these meetings where we have these particular sessions. Imagine having this session and we were only talking about healthcare professions today, and we had a group of employers here as well. It talks about, it encourages to look inside and outside the box in terms of how we can best connect. And the thing about this strategy is that it's what I'll consider to be flexible. And so you all today may have recommendations as to how we can better connect with young persons. And we will take those recommendations on. Because ultimately what we want to see is better outcomes as it pertains to young persons entering in the workplace. And it's all of our responsibility to ensure that we collectively row in the same direction.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taj Donville Otterbridge. And if you know me, you probably know what my line of questioning is going to be about. My question has to do with goals 7, 8, and 9. And it has to do with what is the government doing to encourage LGBTQ plus youth to return to Bermuda when, for example, I myself, I love my country and I want to return and share my knowledge, but then Bermuda doesn't support me and accept me, and it's not a social environment, and I have less rights in this country than I do elsewhere. Why would I return to Bermuda, even if it's economically stable and all of those things? If the social support and social aspect where I'm not socially accepted as a human being in this country, why would I return to Bermuda to work? So what is the government doing to encourage that specific group of young people who's growing in number now? Bermuda likes to ignore it, but it's a growing group. What is the government going to do to encourage them to return to Bermuda?
That's a somewhat of a loaded question, but here's what I'll say. Before becoming the minister responsible for economy and labor, I was president of a trade union. I was also president of the Trade Union Congress. And I had to represent workers no matter what their demographic profile was, no matter what their sexual orientation was. We began with individuals being human beings. And that's the approach I take it from. I look at each and every one of you, and I want to create opportunity for each and every one of you, notwithstanding what makes you different than the next person. Your uniqueness is what's going to allow you to thrive in this particular society. As pertains to what the government has done in terms of rights, that can be an ongoing debate where persons haven't felt that we're done enough for the LGBTQ plus community, but where gaps exist, is for us to close them. We've put policies in place where we prohibit bullying and harassment in the workplace. When we began our consultation as it pertained to bullying and harassment in the workplace, we found that the LGBTQ plus community were recipients of some bullying and harassment in the workplace. So we want to create a level ground across the board in terms of persons being considered for the value that they can provide to an organization and not their unique characteristics without suppressing what makes an individual unique.
Absolutely. I think those are all like really important considerations that we have when deciding where we're going to work, where we're going to go to school. And I know that like in other jurisdictions, for example, in Canada, they have a bill that is targeted towards the specific experience of LGBTQIA plus community. So I think that could be something that we can recommend, that we can look into, because I know it would greatly benefit the population that exists in Bermuda. Does anybody else want to jump in at this time? Ajay?
Thank you. So my question's in reference to Goal 6, to support and promote youth entrepreneurship. So as a ministry, setting an example and lead in offering opportunities for young people, do you plan to offer opportunities outside of the strategy? For instance, exclusively utilizing services and businesses run by young entrepreneurs?
So let me just talk about the goal first, and then I can delve further into the question that you asked. The goal is to recognize that persons have a desire to become entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are a key feature within our community for small and medium-sized businesses. We want to see an expansion of small and medium-sized businesses in our community, and we need to continue to provide mechanisms that support young persons on their entrepreneurial journeys. I had the opportunity of touring workforce development centers and community colleges on the East Coast of the United States as part of a leadership program. And what we've observed is that those small businesses and entrepreneurs who had direct support from governments and municipalities in the form of incubators and accelerators and small business agencies that supported them in their journeys, their businesses were more likely to succeed. We want to create that same environment where starting a business in Bermuda is tough, but we want to ensure that when you embark on this journey, you have enough resources to succeed. And so from that standpoint, yes, when you join up to BEDC, then certainly the BEDC makes recommendations for promotion of goods and services that our young entrepreneurs will provide. And so that is something that we can take into consideration. Just like we build into our tourism strategy that we want to support local entertainers and grant funding is given in that area, there is nothing to stop us from doing the same thing to support businesses that our young entrepreneurs actually develop.
Evening, my name is Alea Hayward, and I have a question regarding Goal 7, specifically young persons exposed to gang violence. So as we know, most of the people unfortunately exposed to gang violence would be young Black males. So my question is, how is the government promoting support for them? Specifically because we've seen a rise in high school dropouts. So my question is, if they haven't finished high school education, how is the government providing them with support and opportunities?
There are a variety of reasons why some of our young men in particular engage in what we consider to be antisocial behavior. Understanding those factors are going to be critical, but also meeting persons where they are. I think this strategy involves us reaching out to young persons and trying to bring them in rather than creating a program and thinking that some of those young men are going to walk into the program. And so it's designed specific because it means that we're going to give individuals personalized attention. Maybe there's some unresolved trauma that that person needs support services. Maybe it's that they don't come from a stable household environment. We say, notwithstanding whatever they're faced with, that we will ensure that we reach out to those individuals and provide them with not just the employment skills and the workplace skills, but also the wraparound services that may be required for that individual, and having assessments on each of those individuals. Now, understanding that that is easier said than done, but I think it is not lost on us that that is a challenge that is in front of us, but this means that we're going to put a concerted effort in place. If a person has been identified as being expelled or kicked out of our school system for whatever reason, reaching that person right after they've been kicked out of the system and trying to provide intervention as soon as we possibly can so that the situation doesn't get worse before we try to provide intervention. But part of it is the willingness of the individual as well to engage in the services that we're prepared to provide. But we'll work on focused strategies to target that population, because certainly we can't have a sustainable economy if we have a growing portion of our young persons who feel disenfranchised with our society and then are determining that they want to engage in behavior that's not beneficial for any of us.
And I actually think that's a great question. I mean, looking around the room, I'm very happy to see so many strong Black women, being represented. But next time when we have a panel, hopefully we could get a few more Black men to come and give their opinion. But I actually wanted to ask specifically about the scholarship process in Bermuda. I feel like a lot of the time, people in more unorthodox careers or going towards more unorthodox careers don't have the ability to get supported for higher level education. We have a lot of support for scholarships like the BFIS scholarships for business, but particularly for me, I'm going into biology and healthcare, and I can't find anything for health, for maybe one thing for Bermuda Hospitals Board, but I don't feel like a lot of people are supported like they need to be so that we have the opportunity to go into youth employment because we have the skills that we need already to go to university.
That's a good point, diversity of scholarships. And at the end of this year, what we've been able to ascertain is that there will be a surplus of scholarship funding that will be used, that will be unutilized. And it's my aim to have direct conversation with those providers of those scholarships, whether or not those funds can be reallocated to other areas outside of the original intent. Because it makes no sense having surplus funding when the funding is there to support young persons, but also increasing the level of the amount of internships as well will go a long way with connecting people with organizations that may be interested in investing in their future as well.
My name is Jordan Simmons-Trott, and I serve as the Functional Academic English Para-Educator at Cedar Bridge Academy and Bermuda Studies Assistant. I would like to, put out some statements more so than a question. If we look at goal number 2, expand career support services for young people from high school through to early employment. I see with some of the purposes, we are looking at, of course, job application support, career counseling, etc. And I think that is awesome. However, I would like to go ahead and state that I'm currently working at summer school And I can go ahead and state that I do think that these items should be worked on middle school. I would even take it to primary school because our children, our Black children, they are not coming into high school with the basic skills that they need to go further. So that's something that I would like to go ahead and see extended just from high school, but also into middle school. And with number 7, looking at the gang violence, I just would like to go ahead and share something that recently disturbed me. I've been in education for 1 year thus far, and during Bermuda studies, I asked my students to go ahead and pretty much do a project and find a Black individual who inspired them. And of course, they brought forth, certain rappers and athletes. And I do not want to go ahead and knock down the greatness that Black people have done in music and athletics. But the fact that none of these children could go ahead and identify any Black Bermudian men in particular, really disturbs me. I find myself fighting to go ahead and get intelligent, noteworthy Black men into our high schools because my Black man need it. They needed it yesterday. They needed it while I was a student at Cedar Bridge Academy. Barkley is here and Cedar Bridge is there. They're not going anywhere. And for me, I just want to vocalize me being very exhausted and very tired going out into the community. We all came from somewhere. We all did. And I do think it would do so much good for these students to go ahead and see someone who looks like them, not to see coming out of poverty, to see a Black doctor who came out from the same situation, to go ahead and see a Black lawyer, particularly with these men. Sometimes I do very much feel like I'm alone in this, particularly at Cedar Bridge with some of the things that I have seen. I could ramble on and on, but I just want to go ahead and make that statement out there because I would love to see more members of government just to drop by in the school, just to sit down, just to talk so these lot can know your name, to know your face. My fellow Black men and Black women who I see, and this actually brings such a joy to my face to see a strong number of people out here, talking about these concerns. I will also love to see you at these institutes as well to give back because I promise you, it's what's needed. It's what they need to go ahead and see. And if we are going to go ahead and change things for tomorrow, it starts today. So that's just my little statement there.
Thank you for those comments. The acknowledgement that we need to start in the middle school system as opposed to the high school system is something we've acknowledged. And if you look at the National Workforce Development Plan, it's a clear indication that those pipelines need to start within the middle school system. Understanding that this was targeted at a specific demographic group, it means that this is now a subcomponent of the overall workforce development system, which has some programs starting earlier within the middle school system. The second thing is it's very difficult in Bermuda. So I'm a politician, but if your child wants to become the leader of a country, it's a good thing until you get there, and then we demonize our leaders. And that is something that we do as a society. We tear down our own, and not just leaders within the political arena, but throughout society. We're filled with negative stories, and we do not do well with highlighting the positive stories within our society. And so when persons are looking for role models, they are also always looking outside of our shores for persons to inspire. And I think we need to do more of building up the positive, people doing positive things within the community. That's not to say don't hold leaders accountable, but certainly you have to acknowledge that the way in which society views certain individuals, then if filters into the paradigm and the mindset of our young persons. I am open to speaking to any of your students on multiple occasions if that is what's required. And so that's an open invitation, and I'll come into the school anytime that I have time to engage in that dialogue. Here's what I will say. We all have a role to play in terms of shaping the mindsets of our next generation. And I think part of the problem that we have as it pertains to even career choices is that sometimes young person's career choices are milled by what their parents are informing them of the direction that they should actually go in. And so paradigm shifts throughout our entire community need to take place, but we do need to do a better job at promoting persons who are doing positive things within our society. Because if we fail to promote the value that those individuals are providing, then the value gets hidden, and then persons are looking in external environments for role models rather than within our country.
Perfect. I'm so happy. I'm sorry if I cut anybody else off. But I'm so happy that you said that in particular with trying to change the narrative. From my experience, I think the best way to change the narrative is to get a hold of it. You are absolutely right. There is a lot of negativity, false information that may be out there about ourselves, about our leaders. And I think if we are to tackle that, that means going and taking it on head first, which would look like coming into the school and explain, hello, I am so-and-so, this is my role, this is what I have done, this is what I'm going to go ahead and do. And by doing that, that eliminates the secondhand information or the guessing that is going around in the country. So I think that is awesome that you have stated that there. But yeah, that's the only part I had to add. Thank you for answering that.
Hi, my name is Kayla McCarthy. I'm attending Cedar Bridge Academy at the moment, and I just wanted to piggyback on what he said first about starting younger. I thought that was a great idea because talking about the unemployment rate starting from 16, I think that that's like the least amount, not the least amount, but the most amount where we should start there, and if not middle schools, then at least there, because that's when it's very prominent, that's when it starts. So definitely around that age, because that's definitely where the dots of employment starts for young people. And yes, I just wanted to agree with that statement.
Just to circle back, I think this is a question that is kind of relevant to the youth strategy. It's one thing to kind of reform how we look at youth employment, but I think what is a goal, like what is one of your goals to tackle nepotism in Bermuda?
So that's where I talked about us creating the bridge to employment through networking, the opportunities you wouldn't naturally have because you come from a different socioeconomic background than the persons who are making hiring decisions, and us closing that bridge for you. And so the workforce development strategy and this youth employment strategy, key features are employment engagement. And what we want to create is enough opportunity for you to network with persons who are responsible for hiring in your occupational category, and build those relationships that wouldn't naturally be built if you didn't have what I would consider to be an arm's length connection with those individuals. And so we want to create as much networking as we possibly can so that you have opportunities to show your value and the attributes that you have to offer to potential employers.
I have a question. Recently in the paper, Colonel Barch talked about the government's hiring process and how it's not necessarily the best. So my question is, one, what is your ministry and the Department of Workforce Development doing to improve the hiring process? And second, I want to know if the government has a blind hiring process where candidates' names are screened off and they're based on solely their skill set. Because no matter when you say networking, it's still going to be somebody's auntie that works at the Department of Workforce Development or somebody's uncle that works at the Ministry of Health, and they're going to always pick that person over anybody else, even if there's someone that's a better candidate. So I just want to know if the government has a blind hiring policy. If they don't, are you going to implement one, or what that looks like for the government of Bermuda specifically?
So my ministry is not responsible for HR of the government, but certainly we can make recommendations as to the barriers that do exist for young persons entering government. Where we want to do a greater push is to expand the amount of apprenticeships and internships within the government. And that removes kind of some of the anomalies that one believe exist in the hiring process, because this gives you an opportunity to share your value within the workplace and do apprenticeships. Most times, if you're being hired as an apprentice, you would actually be retained in the workplace for a number of years to give back on the back end of your development. And so that is one particular strategy. But where concerns are actually raised, it's for us to highlight those concerns to the HR department and find ways in which they can address those particular concerns.
Good evening, Amina Simmons, currently a marketing coordinator. So unfortunately, a lot of young people, regardless of race or gender, have lost kind of trust and hope and all of that in the government because of being let down and because of broken promises and because of the politicians and the government constantly putting out ballots and they're not sticking to what they put on the ballots and stuff like that. So I want to know, what is the government, or specifically this strategy, what are you doing to restore trust of young people so that we can actually believe in, so that we can believe in these programs, so that we can even apply for these programs, or things like that. Because it's one thing to talk about it, as we often do. We talk a lot. So what are we doing to kind of restore the hope?
But this is a natural first step, and this is building a relationship. It's hard to get people to trust you if you have no relationship with the persons that you're asking to trust. And so this conversation is a first natural step. The second thing is action. If I sit here and then a year down the line, you can say, I looked at the strategy and nothing has been done in a year, then certainly why would I ask you to trust me moving forward as a public official? And so it will be for us to ensure that we continue to put out regular updates as to the progress we're made, put out the statistics as it pertains to the opportunities that are existing for young persons, and putting out timely data as it pertains to the youth unemployment rate so that it can actually be monitored and tracked. I know you did say that persons have this perception of broken promises, but hold individuals accountable for what they actually do promise is actually a good thing. And I actually to hold me accountable for whatever I promise to the young people of this country. And if you look at my role as the Minister of Economy and Labor, you look at what was promised within the platform, or you look at what's promised in the Durham speech, and hold me accountable to whatever that is there underneath my ministry. And I have no problem with standing on my record, and all politicians should stand on the record, their personal record, because guess what? In some point in time, we have to face the electorate again, which comprises you all. And at some point in time, we can't continue to tell you that we're going to do things, and you don't see that those things are actually been done.
Good afternoon. My name is Shani Tucker. I attend the University of Southampton in the UK. And I just wanted to say that all of these policies are really beneficial for getting your foot in the door. But once you're in the door, a new set of problems do arise. I know from personal experience and experiences of close friends that once they have attained their internships and summer positions, I asked them what they did today, and it was, I sat at my computer waiting for a task. So what can you do, or have you thought of any strategies to ensure that once the young people are in the workforce, that there's adequate teachers to teach them about the industry that they're going into, so they're not sitting around, so that when they go back to school at the end of summer, they have a whole new bunch of skill sets to take with them?
That is what we aim to avoid, is meaningless internships that create zero value except for persons receiving a paycheck. And so it means that we have to engage companies a lot more, whether it's the government or the private sector. When we have a graduate training program, ensuring that there is a strategy or personal development plan for the individual entering into that program, something that we can monitor and track the performance, ensuring that there are proper rotations. So one person gets to move into multiple departments within that particular workplace to get better exposure of some of the occupational categories that actually exist. And so that will be something that we'll focus on when we start talking about us having better employer engagement.
I want to piggyback off of that question because I wanted to ask, relating to the fact that a lot of things we've been speaking about is improvements with the government programs, but how are we going to, or how does the government plan to encourage private sector companies to increase their internship programs, to increase their training to youth of Bermuda, specifically from Bermudian schools, and not necessarily to just hire people that they know, hire somebody that, might work within their company and things of that nature? What are we going to do to make sure that the private sector is also contributing and encouraging them to do as much as the government is doing?
That work has already commenced in earnest. As I meet with employers, as the Department of Workforce Development engages with employers, these are the things that we're actually talking about. The expansion of internships, the expansion of apprenticeship agreements throughout the entire economy. And so that work is taking place. We recognize that employers do have the capacity to offer a lot more than they're currently offering, and we will continue to hammer home that a key feature of our strategy is unlocking opportunities, and we can't unlock those opportunities unless we are doing a greater level of offering. But sometimes there could be a misconception of what's happening economy-wide based off personal experience. And so even for the government summer employment, we struggle to fill our entire program because of the level of internships and summer employment that was being offered throughout the entire economy. And so there are opportunities that exist, and young persons now have the option whether or not they want to go with one program or the other based off having multiple offers. But we will continue to ensure that there is a level of expansion. And what you've seen, especially from an industry standpoint, is promotion this year that a record number of interns in a number of areas. And we want to ensure that those numbers continue to increase year over year because it could only be beneficial for our youth.
It's Alea again, and my question is regarding employees knowing their rights. So it's kind of piggybacking off of what Jordan said about getting the government, specifically workforce development, into the schools and just knowing faces and things like that. So how does the government plan on ensuring that students are aware of their rights as employees? Because specifically, I know a lot of people that have been, for lack of a better word, kind of screwed over because they were completely unaware of their rights and they didn't have contracts and things like that. So what would the government's plan be just so they are aware?
I smiled at that question because this is what we're doing. It's not just young persons, it's persons through our entire economy that are not fully cognizant of their rights. And what we're doing is we're going to develop a easy reference guide so that persons understand what is the responsibility of their employer, what is the responsibility of employees, what are your rights according to the laws that we have in place. And so we're currently working on a document that will ensure that individuals have a better understanding of what their workplace rights are. And then promotion of that particular document. And I didn't consider ensuring that it's circulated in our school system, but based off of that recommendation that you did just provide, I will ensure that that document is circulated within our school system as well.
And can I just ask that it also be circulated in private schools as well? Because I actually went to work academy and I felt like I was not prepared for the workforce. I had no information kind of about how real life worked. Private school is really in its own little bubble. And yeah, I just feel like I wasn't prepared.
That's a commitment that we can make.
Thank you.
Hi, my question is related to Goal 8. So I just want some clarity on what the implementing a statutory minimum wage is going to look like. And also in the livable wages paragraph, you mentioned implementing a minimum and a living wage. And I was just wondering if you're talking about doing a minimum wage and a livable wage. Are they the same things? And basically, when is it going to be?
Okay, so there's a level of acceptance that persons are not going to work in some occupational categories based off of the wages that are actually provided in those occupational categories. Minimum wage seeks to establish a wage standard across the board. When we that's a statutory minimum wage. When we start talking about a living wage, then we start to factor in what wage is required for a person and the family to attain a certain quality of life, and we would have to create some sort of threshold. Not necessarily will we be asking employers to pay a living wage, but there are other things that the government can do, whether it be reduction in taxes, whether it be providing social protections and other income support that will improve one's purchasing power so that they can enjoy a better quality of life. And so that's kind of the distinction between the two. A minimum wage is solely quantitative, so it will be a value that somebody can get paid underneath. A livable wage will depend on other factors such as your household size. So a person making $30 an hour, if you have 3 children and I have none, that $30 an hour may be a livable wage for myself, but certainly not for your household. And so what additional things, support will your household need, whether it be childcare allowance and things of that nature, that ensure that you and your household maintain a decent quality of life. And that's the way in which we will look at those two measures.
We're going to close out just by throwing it to Minister Hayward to see if he has anything he wants to give to us before we leave, any departing messages, because at Bermuda Youth Connect, although we understand that our leaders have a responsibility to us, we want to make sure that that relationship is mutual. So it's a give and take. So we've asked the minister a lot of questions, and now is his opportunity to kind of give us a call to action or what we can do to help.
Call to action. Continue to engage. You may leave her today and say, there are some gaps in the information provided. We want more details in certain areas, or we want to assist with ensuring that these strategies are actually executed on effectively. And we want to contribute and be part of these solutions moving forward. Then I'm open to doing that. I'm open to having regular consultation sessions such as these off camera, where persons can be a bit more frank in terms of some of the concerns, and we can work collectively together. Being appointed to a public position is not an infinite job. I have a defined life here. At some point in time, I will be voted out. I want to maximize the value I provide while I'm here. And I don't want to squander the opportunity. As a result, if that means that I must engage better with the young people of this country so that we can get effective outcomes, I'm prepared to do so. And so this is an open invitation to create some type of ongoing forum where we can meet and we can discuss. And I can also share, outside of employment, the other things we're doing within the Ministry of Economy and Labor that will benefit the entire community, but our young people as well.
Does anyone have just a quick comment to that? Any response? No? Okay. If nothing, then thank you for joining. This was really productive, really helpful, and we hope to see you at a next one off camera. But thank you, thank you, thank you.